MoveOn.org to find out more. Corinne's going to stick around, and so we'll get more into that later. And we still got to get her to weigh in on Kanye. I'm going to ask my next guest to do that too as well at some point. But first, we're gonna talk to him in the context of some of these races also. Angelo Carusone is the president of MediaMatters.org. He joins us now. Angelo, good morning to you, buddy. How are you, man? Do we have him? Angelo?
I'm well. How are
Oh,
you?
hey, we fine, man. Good. Say hello to Karine Jean-Pierre in studio
Hey,
with
Angelo. Good to hear your voice.
Likewise. Nice to hear you.
us. Angelo, I want to start this way because obviously Karine is with MoveOn. She's talking about GOTV. We're talking about how important it's going to be to get people out to vote in November. But I've noticed something, Angelo, in terms of the mainstream media. It still seems to me that every conversation is still in the context of right wingism, so that after or just around toward the time of the end of the Kavanaugh drama and leading up to confirmation, there were all of these stories about, now we're going to have a red wave. And the people on the right are mobilized. And there wasn't a lot of basis for saying that, but everybody was chiming in on that. Even outlets that before that would never acknowledge a blue wave. Then stories came out a few days later that a lot of the information was false. There was no accurate data to show that there was a great deal of red wave or enthusiasm for Republicans or people on the right. So did you notice that? It just seems that people still want to play into this narrative of validating and elevating those on the right, maybe even more than they deserve to be.
I think that's a totally fair observation, and it sort of it connects back to I think there are two big problems still with the way the news media deals, not just with Trump, but with a lot of these issues generally. One is that they just don't know how to deal with bad faith individuals in public life.
Right.
They haven't learned that yet. It's one of the biggest lessons they haven't learned from 2016. And the other one is they're still really afraid of being criticized as bias. And so as a result of that, one of the ways that they try to inoculate themselves from that criticism is false equivalencies.
Right.
And the biggest way that I saw that playing out, to your observation, was sort of like the proto version of a red wave is coming. Is they started to make the claim that both sides are out there, demonstrating on their behalf. So there's thousands of people out there protesting against Kavanaugh, and then there's like 4 random people, with signs that are pro Kavanaugh, and they're treating it as though they are equal displays of public sentiment. And that was the sort of the first signs that they were moving in that direction, which was they were just treating both as though they were relatively the same, and it started to creep up in the coverage toward the end. And then it kind of morphed into this idea, especially as it became clear that Kavanaugh was going to be confirmed, that basically meant that it was going to motivate conservatives, and they kind of bought into that narrative, and that's sort of the problem. One, it's just like a standard storytelling piece of it. You can't tell the same story forever, right? So you kind of change the narrative. So they were pushing for a blue wave for a while, but they wrote that story for a while. So you shift it up. It's just like in wrestling, right? Where sometimes the same character becomes a good guy and a bad guy. That's how you just keep it interesting. And that was sort of, I think it's a totally fair observation. It played out, and I think it's consistent with larger, deeper structural problems in the way the media covers these things.
And of course there is a false equivalency, and then the demonization of our crowd, which included Karine and myself. Karine was out there demonstrating. I didn't get to go to D.C., but we were all of a sudden were the mob.
Yeah, we were the mob. Yeah. Meanwhile, he's on stage, making wild accusations, and knowing that it's threatening out there for reporters, and in kind of riling up his crowd. Everything he does in those events, his rallies, are mobs. And just to Angelo's point, another thing too, it's like they're false choices. You know, they oh well, if we do this, if we talk about Republicans, then we have to also talk about Democrats, and it's like that's a false choice. Like we don't have to do that, and they do it all the time. Boathism, right? Or whataboutism. It's always comes into play here when we talk about coverage and how we cover this. And at the end of the day, we're not living in normal times. This
Yeah,
is not
yeah.
normal times. It should not be business as usual. And you have a president who has what $2 billion of earned media, so he has that bully pulpit, and he gets to set the message. But yet, it's like we gotta check him. There has to be constant fact checks, and I feel like we're just not doing that. He gets away with just saying things that are abhorrent and dangerous, and like the mob comment.
20 minutes past the hour. Karine, Jean-Pierre in studio. Angelo Carusone on the phone. So, Angelo, also to your point in terms of the way things are covered, what I also notice is where there's very extremely vigorous and I think appropriate coverage when it comes to sexual misconduct in the entertainment world. So mainstream media, would would harshly, for lack of a better word, but objectively, cover Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, in that effort, as you described, to appear to be fair or both sided. When it came to Kavanaugh, there was so much time and validation given to Republican politicians who were making ridiculous statements trying to vindicate him, including the most ridiculous statement of all, where we believe Dr. Ford was assaulted, but we don't believe it was Kavanaugh. Many of those types of statements went utterly unchallenged by the mainstream.
Completely, and that was something that, if you look at the way that even that particular claim evolved, I mean,
Right.
when it was first put out there by Ed Whelan,
Right.
Sort of like a ridiculous right-wing guy, and he posited that conspiracy theory, which was that it's sort of this notion of a false memory. And sort of how it came about. Not only was he widely ridiculed and it was considered this incredible fringe theory, but most journalists were happy to were happy to go after him on Twitter and to make
Right.
that point that it was absurd. This is if before Kavanaugh was confirmed, and then as the story evolved and it actually became the core tenet of, say, Susan Collins and other Republicans, they didn't respond to it with the same ridicule and scorn that they did just 10 days prior. 10 days prior, this was a big part of their Twitter conversation. They were writing articles about how Ed Whelan had posited this conspiracy theory, how it was ridiculous, how he needed to be held accountable. So they were very happy to go after him. And then the moment it sort of became the core and the crux of how Republicans were justifying or threading this needle between saying that they simultaneously believed Professor Ford, but somehow just didn't believe that it was Kavanaugh. It became an acceptable theory, and it was a part. It was just reinforced the larger observation that they are really afraid of cries of bias, and so once it becomes more an establishment notion, they're hesitant to treat it with the same ridicule and scorn. But that evolution of that particular claim, I feel like, was really significant, and it dovetailed with the shift around going from blue wave to possibly this is actually good for Republicans, right? So all of these narratives kind of evolved in parallel with each other, and you could watch it playing out in real time.
We'll stipulate, too, Fox did what it characteristically does, right? I mean, they didn't do anything any different from what they always do. They vigorously defended Kavanaugh and vigorously defended Trump, despite the utter hypocrisy of what happened during the Clinton years, and despite the still, they're still pushing Clinton stories. They're still pushing Juanita Broderick, Angelo.
Yeah, I mean, she was on Fox News a fair amount during the Kavanaugh stuff, and I think. And that's the sort of the whataboutism side of it that Karine was sort of referring to before, right? Which is a big piece of how, the thing that concerns me when they engage in that tactic is that of all the tactics that they play out, especially on the right, the whataboutism is the one that is the most effective at training and equipping their own people
Right.
with responses in their day-to-day lives. Because it's so easy to say, oh, yeah, well, what about Juanita Broaddrick and Bill Clinton? That it completely shifts the conversation, right? You're not talking about Professor Ford anymore and Kavanaugh. You're talking about something completely separate, which may be worth a conversation, but actually isn't germane to the question at hand, which is whether or not Kavanaugh should have been a Supreme Court justice in light of all of the reports against him. And it's the one that does equip their people the most, because when they see that on Fox and they hear it on talk radio, and then they're having conversations in their day-to-day life, or you look at what those conversations look like on social media, that becomes the standard response.
Yeah.
Could actually run searches and find an increase in references to Juanita Broaddrick and Bill Clinton as the more that Fox News begin to lean in on that narrative. And that whenever they do that, it goes to show you that you're actually usually it's the best validation that the thing you're saying is correct, because they're so afraid to engage on it that they literally have nothing, that not even their typical smears would work, and so they default to something like a complete ground shift of the conversation. But it is the one that we, as a movement, haven't really grappled with yet, just because it's hard. You need a real powerful echo chamber, and whataboutism is an effective way to engage in, sort of a mass cultural shifts. It's an effective propaganda tactic.
Yeah. One more thing before we get into Kanye, and I want to get both of you all's thoughts on that. And Angelo tweeted something really interesting. But I took note that the other night, what's today? Friday. So I think
Today's Friday.
So I think it was
Today's the 12th.
I think it was Tuesday
October 12th.
night when he was in Iowa. If I'm not mistaken, Fox didn't even carry his full speech.
Yeah.
Well, now, what is that about, Angelo? I thought that was interesting. Why would
I am so excited you said that.
Yeah, Angelo's the expert.
Yeah, tell me what was going on.
So actually, you're correct in your observation. Something very significant is happening.
Okay.
So every single month this year, Fox News has carried live 100% of Donald Trump's speeches.
Okay.
100%. Whereas the other networks have covered none of it, maybe a few seconds or a few minutes, and it was after the fact. Fox 100%. And Fox was so committed to this that over the summer they actually attacked their competitors, CNN and MSNBC, for not covering the speeches, and made it really clear that it was a part of Fox News's coverage that they would be airing these things live. Then all of a sudden in September, something happened. If you add up all of Trump's rallies, Fox News only covered about 65% of them in total. A big drop. This month, it wasn't just Tuesdays. It was every other speech except for the one that took place last Saturday. Fox has only covered a few minutes of it. They've only covered 21% of his speeches so far this month. And here's the reason. It's not that they're abandoning him. It's actually, in terms of ideology and alignment with Trump, they're all in on Trump. I mean, that is not changing. It's going to get worse because of some decisions that Lackland, who's the new CEO there, has made. It's very clear. But they didn't do this by choice. They were forced to do that. And the reason they were forced to do that is because of something that we talk about sometimes, which is that they are having extraordinary business problems. And one thing that...
Well, thanks for your work on that one, Angelo.
I knew it.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely the reason. One thing that happened, and we referenced it, is over the summer, the biggest argument that companies have had is that they think Fox is too volatile, so there's some risk there. And the second part is they see the rank partisan political operation in play, especially as evidenced when they cover Trump's speeches live, because the other networks aren't doing it. They didn't feel that way in 2016 when everybody was covering Trump's speeches. They didn't feel that way in early 2017 when everybody was covering Trump's speeches live. But when nobody else is doing it, it's not the norm, and Fox News becomes the outlier, and what they're trying to do becomes clearer. And so there was a lot of pressure. And Laura Ingram's advertisers are down 50%. Sean Hannity's overall revenue is down millions of dollars every single week. And obviously Tucker now has become an increasing target of concern and angst amongst the advertisers. And so one way that Fox has sort of tried to inoculate themselves from this idea that they are just an extension of the Trump administration is to literally just not cover his speeches. And they've actually, it's even worse, they've been heralding that as evidence to these media buyers that they've changed, that they're not pro-Trump. They've been working really aggressively to get stories planted about the fact that that their primetime coverage is booming, that advertisers are rushing back to it. There were 3 reporters in the course of in the matter of just a few weeks that each called me with this story that was very clearly given to them by Fox's PR department, all fabricated, all bogus data, and had to walk them through all of how the thing that Fox had given them was a total lie. And of course, those stories never ran because what they were trying to do was promote this narrative that business is better and that it's safe to go back in the water. But Fox was forced to do that, and it's an example of how even if Fox News doesn't disappear, that some of these advertiser efforts can actually lead to real meaningful shifts in coverage, and this is probably the clearest example of it.
Now, is this actually helping get some ad revenue back on some of those shows that have been losing ad revenue?
No.
It still ain't working.
That's great. This is some great news this morning. Thank you, Angelo.
That has not had any effect at all.
That's awesome.
Now they made some changes, and it is going to be a really difficult few months because what Fox has done is taken their head of advertising. And promoted them to be in charge of all advertising for all of what's called New Fox, the company after the sell-off to Disney. And Gabriella is no stranger to these advertiser efforts, and she has internalized something that Rupert Murdoch has done, and we've talked about some of this synergy before, which is that she is not afraid to leverage the other parts of Fox News, of Fox's apparatus. So, they will use their entertainment advertising slots as sort of a cudgel for advertisers. So if you're not buying the kinds of advertising that you need to buy on Fox News, maybe you won't get the better deals that you would get on some of their sports programming or entertainment programming. And so I think that there's going to be some real concerted pressure on the advertising community to start to move back to Fox's primetime. But I think that the storm can be weathered because I think the damage is too far done at this point, that they're just not going to be able to make a couple, check boxes and bring these advertisers back. And it certainly doesn't help that Tucker has basically gone full white nationalist on air.
Right,
or Ingram is shortly behind him.
Yeah, and to your point again, as we've talked about them leveraging the other properties, the sports and whatnot. Yeah. Are you boycotting football? Are you watching football?
I never watched.
You never watched First Break.
It's not my thing.
So just
I don't watch it,
I don't either. But even more so now.
Yeah.
Because Angelo educated us about this. So because I want you to hear this, Karine, and others who haven't heard it before. The sports coverage subsidizes Fox News Channel for what they use from the advertisers.
Oh.
So, Angelo, I don't know if you noticed this. So I went out with the last big protest we had at the NFL headquarters. I spoke about that at the protest. And I said, these owners who, I'm not an owner. I don't own an NFL team. So you would think they'd be smarter than me. But they give a contract. They award Fox Sports the NFL contract so that then Fox News Channel can bash the NFL over the anthem policy.
Wow.
And I said in front of them, I said, if y'all owners were smart, you wouldn't give them another contract. And now the NFL network cameras were out there. How do you have your own network?
Bashing.
But use your own network rather than give it to Fox. Put the games on the NFL network. That's where everything's moving anyway. And then I even said, you think people wouldn't watch the NFL on Netflix? Lo and behold, about a month ago, there was a conversation. The NFL saying to get more people involved, they were thinking about putting Thursday Night Football on Netflix or something.
There you go.
And I said that out in front of the thing, but that's what they do. So, folks, when you watch football, not only are you going against those of us supporting Colin, who Kanye invited to the White House yesterday too, and obviously wouldn't go, but you also are helping to support, at least if you watch, even if you don't want to completely boycott football, I wouldn't watch it on Fox because they're double dipping. They're showing us football, but then bashing the players with Tucker Carlson and Sean and everybody else on the news channel. So that's just something to think about.
Wow.
Let's do this. Angelo, how's your time? You got some more time?
I do.
Okay, beautiful. Let me take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about Kanye. I want to get, because Tucker Carlson was talking about Kanye. I want to get Karine's thoughts on Kanye. We'll get to some of your calls as well. Don't go away. Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn, Angelo Carusone of Media Matters. 2 for the price of 1. Right here, Sirius XM Progress 127, Resistance Radio. Get woke and vote. Get ready for impeachment. This is MIP.
Get ready for impeachment.
Those of you on our stream, stay tuned. We're just in a 2-minute commercial break. We'll be back and we'll continue our conversation with my very special guests, Karine and Angelo. Thank you very much.
This is MIP. Get woke.
All right. 22 minutes before the hour. Angelo Carusone of Media Matters on the line. Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn.org in studio. All right, Karine. Kanye West, you go first.
Oh man. So I am still processing the Kanye West thing because I was thinking this morning about College Dropout, right? That came out in 2004, 2005. Excuse me if I don't have the date right. And the brother was woke, right?
Yeah.
He was socially conscious. He was aware. He was pro-black. And he was considered a genius after that album. And then let's not forget, Katrina a few years later saying, George W. Bush doesn't care about black people.
Right.
And he always, the Kanye West that I remember always had that, his finger on the pulse and pushing the narrative, pushing the envelope. And to have seen what I saw yesterday, it was, and I was talking to you off air, I was saying to you that, the last couple months, the whole Kanye thing that I've been hearing about, I thought, okay, he's just trying to sell an album. We shouldn't give him any attention, right? This is just him trying to sell an album. And then you see what happened yesterday for that 10-minute rant, and it's sad.
It is.
Really, really is sad. And like I said, I'm still processing it, so I don't have a full kind of concrete analysis. So I'm walking you guys through my process of thinking, and the things that he's saying. Also, it's sad, but it's also dangerous to say, oh yeah, I put this MAGA hat on, I feel like Superman. Donald Trump is like a father to me. I mean, these are things that are, I feel, yes, crazy, but problematic. To see this black man who was once woke and socially conscious, is now falling into this world of white nationalism, white supremacy, a man that does not care about black people, brown people, as we know, immigrants, women, LGBTQ community. He only cares about himself and people who are like him, which is white, straight, and rich.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so it is disheartening.
Yeah. Uh, Angelo Carusone, your thoughts. And I love what you tweeted on yesterday. Donald Trump looks at Kanye West the way most people look at Donald Trump. Because he was sitting there looking at him like,
Yeah.
and he just let him talk. He just literally
Yeah.
let him make a fool out of himself. But Angelo, your thoughts on Kanye, and also how Kanye's role, how he fits into the whole Fox/Donald Trump agenda.
I mean, he will be. Well, yeah, I'll separate that out because I think how he'll be used is the thing that really concerns me the most, which is that he will be used to validate every single right-wing lie and some of the core tenets of white genocide. One of the most consistent right-wing narratives that we have heard for decades now has been this idea that all of these social welfare programs are actually inherently racist, that they are designed to keep people of color on the roles of government, and when you have somebody like Kanye West, who's not only black but a really big figure, saying those things, they point to it as evidence, as the proof. This is the final proof. And Trump is doing the same thing. I watched every single rally, and for weeks now, Trump has been. So even though they're not airing, I still have to watch them. But he talks about it. He references Kanye West now as a part of his speech, and every single speech it comes up. Because it is used as evidence that validates their core critique of the right-wing narrative. And that, to me, is the thing that scares me the most, because those anecdotes are powerful. They will matter. It will matter a lot, especially because there's a conversion story associated with it, that he actually went from being a really fierce critic of Republican policies and of Bush in particular to being somebody who's so pro-Trump. That it actually adds a lot of energy and momentum behind it, and it does concern me, because it is going to be a really powerful tool for them to use and deploy. And the part about what's going on, I don't know. I look at it in a few ways. One, he actually could really genuinely be bipolar and having a manic episode, which doesn't justify or rationalize anything, but it shows the ways in which he's being rankly exploited, especially by members of the news media.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that and it's true, the way that Trump looks at him is also the way the television news media looks at Kanye, right? Like this sort of unexpected, waiting for a train wreck, so we're going to cover every second of it because something ridiculous could happen sort of approach. There was no real reason for the TV crews to be there in the volume that they were yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, all they've really done is incentivize Trump and Kanye to do it again, because
enable
of the way that it was treated and covered. Just the pure saturation of it all.
Yeah,
so that's a concern. And I think separately from that, and I think this is sort of a part of T.I.'s critique, which I thought was really smart, which was that he also, even if this is just an elaborate scheme, let's even give him the complete best approach and option here, that this is not some horrible shift. That it's not the result of some kind of a mental health problem that's not being treated effectively and managed correctly, but that actually he is doing this as some sort of meta way of milking Trump for a few modest things, either for the community or for himself, because he did talk about tax incentives and tax breaks for himself, that it still doesn't justify or rationalize it. That even if he's going into this knowingly to try to extract some gains or benefits, that it doesn't make it okay, because it's forcing you to give up something too great, which is, one, a part of yourself, and two, that you're becoming a puppet in a tool that will actually be used for much worse ends. And so I don't see any way to look at it that you could make it not a horrible critique.
Well, and we also note that, and you tweeted this as well, Tucker Carlson said that he said some genuinely interesting things. But I didn't see it. I just saw the chyron. So was Tucker saying that as if he supported some of the things he said, or was he actually?
Totally. Yeah, without a doubt. The coverage of Kanye's content last night on Fox was really positive. Right. And they really were pushing the notion that that Kanye had said really interesting things beyond the idea that he had validated their core critique of many of the social welfare programs and also proved that Donald Trump is not a racist. And, they put those right at the top and then they moved on. Then they gave him also some more flattering, fluffy coverage, which was, he said a lot of interesting things about not just tax breaks and the idea for innovation, but how we need to change our schools to make them more interesting and charter schools. It all sort of tied into. They tried to tease in a lot of the things that Kanye had said with larger, with sort of larger right-wing things that they push for, and then to sort of put a bow on all of it, they actually grabbed the bull by the horns when they came to the shift, and they pointed out that liberals loved Kanye in the past, and now they don't believe him anymore, and they don't support him anymore because he's not saying the thing that they want, and now they're just an angry mob after him. And that even Kanye had referenced that he had been sort of pushed and criticized and potentially attacked and threatened as evidence of this dangerous left-wing angry mob that's out there, that they really are the people of violence, and that even Kanye had sort of given a wink and a nod to that. But Tucker was very effusive in his praise of Kanye. Thought he was very smart.
Right. But this is dangerous, folks, because there's some who will use Kanye to validate. I don't see any evidence yet that young people are being too swept up in it. But I think we got to watch for that.
Yep.
I mean, it's still too early to tell. And I hope that, I'm glad some of the other performers and artists like T.I. saying, no, this ain't. This. I heard Nick Cannon said something strange. And I want to be careful, too. I mean, I want to be very critical, but I don't talk about his timing as harshly as I talk about others, because I do think he's unwell. And I'll say this. How many artists have we seen who suddenly overdosed or took their own lives, and we had no indication that was going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, how did this person, we had no idea that they were just going to die. If the news broke right now that Kanye took his own life or something, who would be surprised?
Yeah.
Because that's how disturbed he seems. So I hope somebody can figure out a way to do an intervention. Let's get a couple of calls in. Mike's in Florida. Mike, God bless you. Good morning. Get woke and vote. You're on the air with Karine Jean-Pierre and Angelo Carusone. Go right ahead, Mike in Florida.
Thank you so much. Karine, great work. And did you say it was Carmen, the gentleman?
Oh,
No, Angelo.
Angelo. I'm sorry, I'm stuck with the image of him having to watch all of Trump's rallies. So I had to get over that. But as far
he
as
does it for us. He takes it. He falls on his sword for all of us, so we don't have. He watches it, so we don't have to.
Yeah, he does great work too.
Takes it for the team. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, Dramamine works. As far as Kanye goes, I could say a joke, but coming from the mental health field and knowing family members, he is. It's not a question. He's unwell. The fact is that they're using him, and they know it, and they're using an unwell person. I do worry about his health. He's twice the man Trump is, because Kanye is mentally ill and ignorant. You got to separate the two. Mm-hmm. Trump is only ignorant. So, Kanye's got that on him.
Well, and, Trump may be a little off too.
There's a difference between mentally ill and evil. And
possibly having tertiary syphilis, because that's the other speculation too, because that affects the brain.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know about that, did you?
I did. Wow.
Karine's looking like what? That's out there.
Happy Friday morning, y'all.
He might have untreated syphilis, but go ahead though. Finish your point, though, Mike.
Wow.
I don't know. I think tertiary means 3, so he's probably got primary if there's such a thing. But the thing about Kanye is get him help and do your thing. But here's the connection, though, which is crucial to think about. And as far as Tucker Carlson goes, we're talking about mental illness in a world of GOP operatives that like to push conspiracy theories, which are crazy unless you're not crazy. And if you're not crazy and you're pushing conspiracy theories, you're doing it for money and power. Mm. And so the fact that Kanye is in it, there is a parallel to the same people in the world who continue to believe this kind of evil spreading of nonsense, which Trump is good at and knows how to exploit. So, we need to make that connection. We need to think about people that are mentally ill and then realize that, he is mentally ill and wealthy.
What did you
There
say
are
you're in the mental health field?
Yes, and
What
I
do
have
you What do you
family
do?
members. Well, I counsel, and especially people that are bipolar and schizoaffective, and it's a huge world. And we're talking, when we talk about this, it's a whole other topic. We're going to have to get my own guest spot.
Okay.
But we're talking about people incarcerated, mentally ill, and here's another connection politically. Do you think they want mentally ill people, voting? Of course not, because they're linked to either felonies in Florida. By the way, another thing, Amendment 4, getting these people their rights back. They delegitimize citizens if they have a felony, and a felony
Right.
does not mean murder.
Right.
So
Okay.
everybody out in Florida, Amendment 4.
That's right. That's coming up on that ballot too. That's very important. That's very important. And hopefully that's an initiative that will also drive people to the polls in Florida. Corinne, speaking of getting out the vote, because that's very important. Yeah, that's going to make a big difference. That's going to make a very big difference.
If Florida goes, our way, this is crucial that Florida goes yet again.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but no, that's a good point. The Mike mentioned Angelo exploiting the mentally ill, and Angelo, it seems I remember reading years ago. I mean, you may be too young to remember this, but I wish I could go back and find it. Maybe we can go back and find it. When Clarence Thomas was nominated, someone had written about how the GOP and the right wing purposely seeks out people with issues like that they can exploit.
Wow.
And so, did you ever see or read anything like that, Angelo? Does that jar your memory at all? I remember seeing that somewhere.
I don't remember anything seeing like that. I mean, it doesn't surprise me.
I want to go back and find that. I've got to research that. So whenever you see somebody like a Kavanaugh or a Roy Moore, that's not just random or accidental. Because if you put somebody up like that and you even know their flaws and they know you know their flaws, they will do whatever you demand of them. And they will be loyal to you, especially if you defend their flaws and their craziness. There's no way nobody didn't know about Kavanaugh. And Politico did a piece on how, did you hear about this? Some of the Democratic senators were on the phone with Grassley and some of the Republican senators. And Kavanaugh was on the phone. So they were asking him about some of these allegations. And Grassley said, well, what about this other woman? Some other woman he brought up that the Democrats didn't even know about. They said, well, who are you talking about? What woman is this? So they knew there were other allegations. There were even, don't think there weren't people calling Grassley's office, just like people were calling Feinstein's office.
Right.
But they didn't disclose that to the public.
Right.
But Politico did a story. There's a whole other woman out there that was never in the public that they asked him about in this phone call.
Right.
So they know about all of that.
It's not surprising. It's one of those things where when Republicans do it, it's okay.
Yeah.
They can get away with it. But when the other side does it, then, oh no, let's blow up everything.
Right.
But it doesn't, because what you're just saying, the Kanye piece totally speaks to what you're saying, which is like clearly there is something wrong. I hate touching the mental health issue because I'm not an expert and I don't know what's going on.
Right.
But anybody can watch that and say, this is not normal.
Yeah.
This is not normal behavior. And they exploited him. They absolutely exploited him. Now we can have different analysis about what happened to Kanye, where he is now, and whatever it is that he's trying to do for himself, and what's the self kind of gratification. I have no idea, but yeah, you can't look at that. Let me put it this way: no normal presidency would have done what we saw yesterday.
No, and it was enabling on both sides.
Right.
He enabled Trump and Trump enabled him, and it's sad.
Right. And Trump sat there, like you said, looking at Kanye, like, this is crazy.
Yeah, even he
was.
That was a good point, Angelo, you made, because I was watching. Said Trump, he's like, I'm just gonna let this dude talk.
Yeah. He was like, wow, this is a train. You could even see it in his eye. This is a train wreck. Are the cameras on? Like, you could see it in his eyes.
And what's amazing, Angelo, you're right. He looked at him the way people look at Trump. and it's interesting. And Trump is so self-unaware that he didn't see that. I wonder if it crossed his mind. I wonder if this is what people do to me.
I don't think he's that self-aware.
Of course not.
I don't think so.
Do people just look at me and let me talk like this? Because some of them do.
Well,
I'm gonna
when he was done, he was like, "That was something."
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it was a train wreck.
He actually looked at the
he
news
said the
meeting
same
and
thing
was like,
about Brett
"Wasn't that
Kavanaugh.
something, everybody?" And like he just didn't know how to engage with it, and it is probably an experience that most people have. That is an experience most people have when interacting with him.
Right. He didn't think it was going to go to that level of crazy, especially when Kanye West got up and said, "I'm going to give you a hug." He was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm going to give. Can I give you a hug?"
Right. Went over, hugged him and everything.
Yeah.
And Jared sitting over there looking like Frankenstein. It was crazy.
It was crazy.
MediaMatters.org, President Angelo Carusone. Angelo, thank you, buddy, for spending this time with us, all right? Love you, man. We'll talk next
Bye,
time.
Angelo.
Bye-bye. And Karine, Jean-Pierre, MoveOn. So glad you came in.
Thank you so
It's a pleasure
much.
to see you. Wonderful to see you.
I'm such a fan. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
All right, folks. Performing acts of kindness on behalf of an elder young person. Respect, honor, protect all the women. Write a letter to sister, brother, just happened to find her himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand and whose eternal vigilance we humbly aim to emulate. Above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us that we give each other love. We do our very best every day, not only to offer you all the love, but to make it plain. Peace.
That was great. I didn't know you did that.
Yeah.